When you're a thorn in the side of the New World Order, and Willem Engel, the Dutch biochemist, certainly is, you end up getting arrested again and again. It's an occupational hazard of bringing the truth to the people about issues like COVID, Agenda 2030, and the One World, One Health plans of the New World Order. Despite the attempts of the Dutch establishment to silence Willem Engel, he's speaking up still, and now he's standing with the farmers, determined to resist this agenda. We sat down with William to discuss what it is that the New World Order has in store for us and what the Dutch resistance aims to do about it.
All this pushing towards Agenda 2030 has made the multinationals and the big corporations much wealthier and much more influential. And the small companies have been decimated by all these COVID regulations. People are getting poorer and poorer. Even in Holland, which is a fairly rich country, people are feeling the burn literally by the fuel prices. And this winter might be a very heavy winter, especially when we look at Germany, who go completely berserk in their effort to try to cement these COVID regulations. And on top of those, they want to have these climate regulations, which they have tied to trying to boycott Russia for the Ukraine. It's so bizarre. But the most bizarre thing of this is that there's a large chunk of the population still being quite apathic to it and say, okay, well, if that needs to happen, we'll just lie down and roll over.
Mm-hmm. But not the farmers. And in the USA, not the truckers, not the working class. I mean, there's a whole load of class warfare, which is sort of concealed in this and not allowed to bleed through into the mainstream liberal analysis of all this, because it's telling where the resistance is coming from. And what is the popular support like?
It's still very large. And I think after almost 2 months, the government is worrying. My feeling is that if they keep this up for a few other months, that they will have to retract those nitrogen plants and put them in the fridge again. The popular support started at 80%, but even after roadblocks, it still remained very steady at around 70%. So the majority of the population is actually behind the farmers, and the regime has a big problem trying to sell their Agenda 2030. And the beauty of it is that these farmers have first been very skeptical about the corona critics. They didn't see the connection, but now it's happening to them, and not only to the Dutch farmers, but also to the Irish, to the UK, to Canada, to Sri Lanka, and eventually it will happen to all farmers, because it is a program, it's a protocol. And by connecting the dots, these farmers are also waking up to the harsh truth that we are headed for slavery.
It's terrific, isn't it? Because there was a point when it was just confined to COVID alone that they were making tremendous traction with a huge percentage of the population who weren't aware of the dangers, and this ignition of grassroots resistance. And you're saying a dawning awareness that there's an agenda behind both COVID and the nitrogen issue and the whole thing. It means that the information warfare is being lost. In other words, the stuff you're putting out, I'm putting out, all of us are putting out who are tuning in, watching this and all that. It's bleeding out enough in order for it to become now an impediment.
So I really want to talk courage into people that if the regime retaliates by censoring channels, by doing these hate campaigns, we're actually winning. This is a sign of us winning, because they are going into overdrive. If everything was running smooth, they would not have to use these tactics. What we see happening with the farmers, doing the same thing as they did with the anti-measure demonstrations, trying to incite violence, cracking down on farmers, trying to arrest them. They even shot at some of these farmers, and that backfired completely. That actually cemented the public opinion in favor of the farmers and against the police. So what we're seeing now is that the police doesn't really want to tackle this problem. And then you see that politicians are neutered. If they shout, but they don't have police trying to implement what they shout, they're standing there,
Well,
powerless.
you're at the absolute front line of the battle against this agenda right now in the Netherlands. Of course, you would be, wouldn't you, when you connect back the power structures and figure out who's behind all of this and the power structures you're up against. Of course, it
Yes.
would be in the Netherlands that you're running it. And partly that's because they're trying to speed up the agenda because they know they're running out of rope. You know, globalist rope is running out in the United States, and there's going to be people dropping off the end of the rope in November as the balance of power shifts in the USA and the globalist agenda.
It will be very interesting. November, we have the midterms, but before that, we have in October the general election in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, China and Russia have decided not to do the one world, one health government.
Mm-hmm.
They are pursuing their own kind of dictatorship. So I'm not saying that they will save us, but there is not a unified front anymore. And I think trying to coerce Russia into cooperating with the plan has backfired. If you look at the countries that boycott Ukraine, it is only the West. So the West is getting isolated in that sense. And through Ukraine, the rest of the countries around the world can see, they're not all powerful, so why should we follow? And this is especially Latin America and Africa, they're breaking off.
They are absolutely. I've been speaking in videos since the Ukraine thing got going, and since this emerging BRICS plus structure came up, I would agree with you that there are totalitarian aspects to both Russia and China that cannot be ignored fundamentally and around the world, which means that in fact it is Europe that is a beacon of light. It is Europe that is the heartland of civil rights. It is Europe where we have to defend these rights because nowhere else on the planet are they in place to the extent they are in Europe, not even in the United States, because it has a pseudo-political structure, not a real one, because of the two-party system. So indeed, the awareness that you have of this and the pivotal nature of Europe in this battle is vital right now. We realize that you in the Netherlands are taking them on because they've had to accelerate the agenda to try and push ahead with it now while they have that COVID momentum, while there is a degree of paralysis and psychological warfare effects still operational within the general public. So it's also time for us to step up. What's your feeling of how things go from here?
Absolutely. And what we're seeing, they're trying to connect climate and environmental and COVID together to get, to get this plan going and to have climate lockdowns. They want to transition, especially in Germany, towards these means. But I am very skeptical whether they will get it going because there's such a huge feeling of enough. People had enough. I see that a lot of people are rejoicing. The weather is great. And now suddenly we shouldn't feel great about the weather. It's warm in Holland. I took a dive in a lake today. But according to politicians, we have to be very careful because we have a new drought coming in, a record heat. It's all doomed.
Well, look, this is something that we in the sort of COVID skeptic community realized early on, that the sense which a proposition makes has no bearing on the matter, that it's the frequency at which the proposition is put that matters. Propaganda is the relentless putting of a particular perspective, regardless of whether it makes sense at all. And often it requires a degree of sense simply from the repetition. But the global warming or climate change one is illustrated or counterpointed brilliantly by just looking at the difference between human and solar output. Because if we go back to 1962 and start the clock running then and start to measure all human energy output from 1962 until now, 50 years of all the energy that the earth that the humans on the earth output, every car, everything, every refrigerator, every air conditioner, everything for the last 50 years, add it all up, figure out how much energy that is, what the bill would be for it all. And then let's see how long it takes the sun to output that much energy and land it on the surface of Earth. 60 seconds. 60, I worked it out, Willem. 60 seconds it takes the sun to output the same energy as all human activity in the last 50 years. It's complete bullshit.
Yes. Yes. And I think even though a lot of people do not connect everything yet and do not understand the science behind it, or the fake science, as is now proven, their gut tells them this can't be happening. This can't be right. We go from crisis. First it was COVID, then climate change. They already tried last year. Then we get a war. Then we get environmental. Then we get financial. This is not ever stopping, and that is the plan. It's a blitzkrieg. They want to overwhelm us.
You know, if I was to take advantage of the current situation and begin to speak with farmers here and begin to, you know, because I'm living in a rural area, I will find those farmers on the end of a line from the European Union with various grants and payouts, etc. They're not free to act because they're essentially, all of the profit has been sucked out of farming to be replaced by state grants to impoverish the farming sector. So their capacity to resist has been diminished as well. How is that playing out in the Netherlands, and what's your hope for how all that will play out in the months ahead?
Yeah, I think in Holland the situation is still a little bit better. So we have a lot of, I believe, 60,000 farmers, which are quite independent and have good running companies. Now, of course, all farmers in Europe have been heavily subsidized and regulated, and that's the slavery system you're talking about. But within those country differences, I think the Dutch farmers are ahead of the game and still have some fight left in them. And if the regime doesn't quell this farmer uprising, of course, it becomes a beacon of hope for farmers all around the world to stand up and literally stand their ground, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about confiscating or expropriating the land. It's not really about reducing the emission of methane or the emission of nitrogen. No, it is about land grab. It is about controlling the food supply. It's about controlling the supply chains.
It reminds me of the railroad barons era in the United States. You know, that's what we're dealing. We're dealing with people with monopoly infrastructure control, including media, most importantly, and then translating that into power. But they really do want to turn us into livestock. This is the problem, and this is the danger I see in all of this, and why we have to walk away from the whole thing. We don't have a problem with medicine. We have a problem with the fact that the food which has been produced and the manner in which it's been consumed is driving a medical crisis, which is already evident in the increasing morbidity in people in the United States, because they got into the model first, and they aim to export that model and worse globally, producing the same and worse health effects as we see in the United States at the moment. And then counterpointing that, we have a medical system which is, see no evil, it's blind to the food sources of it all, blind while it implements yet more policies which produce profit for the same pharma chemical sector. So it's like having the coal miners eating, you know, really disgusting food in the company-owned store at the coal mine, which is making them sick and killing them, and you don't care.
That's absolutely. Yeah, and it feels that governments really want people to be as helpless as possible, because if they are dependable, or if they depend on government, they can be controlled, they can be surveilled, and it gives the government a value to exist.
Well, that corporate structure which underpins all of that has been relentlessly working away in the background, knitting all of these different threads together into this one world, one health integration of both human health, animal health, and environment under this technocratic structure.
You were one of the first people that talked about this agricultural companies. I know that, I think it was in 2020, we talked about the the players, the cartel that was trying to upend the game and trying to seize power. And very early on, you made the connection between big pharma, big chemical, and big agricultural companies, which are aligned. And now we're seeing it playing out. Bill Gates and Soros and others are buying huge swaths of land. They're involved in GMO companies. So now we can extrapolate to where this is going.
Well, you could all goes to prove that you can break up AG Farben, but you can't break up the culture because it'll reintegrate like one of those Terminator guys. AG Farben was the huge pharma chemical company back in the World War II era, which was part of the German apparatus and which was notoriously broken up after the war because they wasn't really. It's still operational. They're in separate companies, but the whole ethos of using agriculture and chemical to control the world is still there and driving this agenda. Those are the sort of business roots of this in Europe, aren't they, Willem?
Absolutely. I think there's a clip going around showing that the European Union is in that sense the Fourth Reich, especially when you look at who holds the patents. Then it's Germany one, Holland number two, I believe. And of course, the UK just broke off, but it's a few countries which hold almost all the patents. So with those patents, they control the markets. It's in that sense neo-colonialism. But now it's not only the lands that they want to colonize; it's us they want to colonize.
Nevertheless, unfortunately for them, the technology which is pioneering and driving all of this, the internet, which we're using right now to subvert them, is something that we can use to our benefit because small is beautiful. And this can enable us to create network local communities of food, health, and community, which are outside of their structure, walking away in key areas. And I believe you can actually put together a very happy and wealthy life if you can figure out how to walk away from their food and their pharma. This is just worth a bundle to you, and start to go back to small is beautiful. Drop this huge mass distribution food model altogether. It doesn't work. You have the preservatives and other things used are just contrary to human health. It doesn't work. Everything that you eat should be produced within 50 miles, except for the exceptional items you have to import. You know what I'm saying? That
absolutely
we need to go back.
And I think that is the silver lining to the story. By disrupting the supply lines so heavily, people will need to go local. This whole global agenda is in many aspects reaching the opposite.
Yeah, well, there's a growing awareness, and it's a question of crystallizing that awareness into this. And I like the autonomy concepts behind viruswarhead.nl and also your own philosophy, that while mass political movement may or may not resolve these issues, our individual actions can absolutely resolve them by changing the way we're doing it, stopping buying where we were buying there, sourcing local, changing the way we interact with medicine, doubting, stepping away, walking away from it all, and constructing a different kind of life. And if we do that, we can seed something, and that will win. Mass movements are often defeated, but
it's a battle of ideas and it's a battle of ideology. If you look at the 17 SDGs on face value, this is what a lot of people want. So it's not the objectives that are wrong, it's the means to reach these objectives. They want to reach those objectives. And when I say they, I talk about the transnational organizations, United Nations, European Union, etc. By centralizing, by globalizing, by surveilling, by controlling, by power structures, by technocracy. Now, what we really need to do is exactly what you said, is to try to value the things that are in our vicinity. So first of all, your own individual, your family, your community. And with those communities, we can build beautiful local lives. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't import. I'm not saying that we shouldn't fly, but the core of our society should be our community. not even our city, but smaller. The village life should be central to human life.
Yeah, well, we're technologically putting ourselves in a position to make that all come true. There was if you look at the positive aspects of this, there was a tendency to concentrate and a need to concentrate in cities in the early stages of development. We don't need to do that anymore. Because we can come together technologically, no matter where we are. So, in fact, we should be re-inhabiting the country. In fact, like Dorothy, we should be going back to Kansas. And as I say, I'm in a rural area here, and there's plenty of space for you guys.
But that's the crazy thing. There is plenty of space. And I realized that when I was traveling through New Zealand on the South Island, it's almost uninhabited. And I was staying at a camping ground and putting my tent somewhere where I had a lot of space. And I saw a group of Koreans really almost tumbling over each other. And to me, it was so alien, like, why are these people doing it? But it is just their habit, because they were doing it at home. So they brought that with them. And I'm not saying anything bad about Koreans, but it should make us realize that we are creatures of habit, but we can change those habits if it fits our needs.
Well, you need good science behind all of that. That's why it's so terrific that you did put that event together, the Science Summit. And are you planning to do another?
So we're having an evaluation talk on Friday, and I think a lot of people were very enthusiastic. We want to make it at least a yearly event. And we had a lot of requests to do something for autonomy, because this is really about science. What's the science behind COVID? What's the science behind the driving force of Agenda 2030? So economics, history, politics, immunology, medical science, etc.
It's great work you're doing, William, and all the rest who were there the weekend. Thanks to all of you. And I hope if any of those who were attending or tuning into this, thanks for all the work that all you guys have done. And thanks for the work that you've done, Willem, on this too.
Thank you very much.
Okay. That's it, folks, for this edition. I'll be back with more soon. I hope you can join me for that. But in the meantime, this has been Fintan Dunn reporting. See you soon.